everything is so much better with HDR, and that's why
HDR is a scam.
No, he is clearly watching the wrong YouTube channels. I'm playing this game right now on my LG CX, and there's a reason for it. Not just because this TV is just a great TV, OLED TV, and because of OLED we have perfect black levels, what we actually need for a game like this. No, the reason is actually Dolby Vision support on the LG CX, because Dolby Vision is my favorite mode to play this game. And I like to make one thing very clear. This game, Alan Wake, does not support Dolby Vision natively. It is just compatible with Dolby Vision, but Dolby Vision in this game is doing one thing a little bit better than HDR10. Dolby Vision gives you a little bit of a higher maximum peak brightness. In one example, I measured almost 600 candela with Dolby Vision. With dynamic tone mapping on, it was around 580 candela, and with HGHG enabled, it was just around 570 candela. So you can see Dolby Vision has a slightly of an advantage compared to HDR10. But don't expect too much, because this is still just the SDR mastered game. We're really just talking about Auto HDR on the Xbox Series. So it is really not comparable with properly mastered HDR games. Okay, so let's talk for a moment about Auto HDR, because this is something what I don't understand. So all the online forums or whatever are calling this update Auto HDR update for Alan Wake, but I do not have ticked this box. And when I'm reading this, for games set to run with standard visual dynamic range SDR, the console will display them in high dynamic range HDR on compatible displays. Games will need to be restarted to apply this setting. So this is what I understand. So if I have a SDR game and I tick this box, I can run it with HDR. But I was in the impression I need actually an update on the game or for the game. But in this case, as you can see, this is not ticked at the moment. And when I'm going into Alan Wake, and you will see it in a second, my HDR symbol will pop up here. It is working. So please put in the comment section, what do I miss here? In terms of HDR settings in Alan Wake, we have 0, because this game is still an SDR game which just received an Auto HDR update. And again, I have no idea what does it mean, because you have seen my Auto HDR setting or option is actually not ticked, but I still have HDR right now. So again, please put in the comment section what I'm missing here. Anyway, in the option menu, we have a brightness setting, which is the only setting where we can change brightness actually. And I proved it, or I verified it, that this setting here, the brightness setting, has no impact whatsoever in specular highlights like the moon. So feel free to change this setting as you think it is the best for your environment or for your experience. But what we need to consider is that Alan Wake supports the system level calibration menu on the Xbox Series. That means it is very important what you set up here, but there's a limitation what I found. So I tested, of course, what is the difference between the minimum setting, which is 300, or the maximum setting, which is 10,000. And to my surprise, there's not much of a difference, because 300 is around, or setting 300 here is around 500 candela in the game. Setting this to 10,000 is around 880 candela in the game. So this game is limited to a maximum peak brightness from 880 candela. But nevertheless, make sure your HDR setting on the Xbox Series is set up in the correct way. And how to do this on non-HGHG supported TVs, it's actually quite simple. So all what you have to do is press the 4 shoulder buttons at the same time, and you will get a very nice little menu here. And all what you need to know now is the maximum peak luminance from your TV, and you can find this most likely online. Anyway, the first screen, leave it at 0. The second one is the maximum peak brightness on your TV or from your TV. In case of the LG CX, it's 800, or because I have HGHG enabled, it is until I can't see any pattern anymore. Next page, exactly the same. I'm increasing the brightness until I can't see any pattern anymore. And in this case, it's also 800 candela for the LG CX. If you're using a different TV, of course, you have a different peak brightness. But again, keep in mind, even if you increase this to 10,000, the game is still limited to 800 candela. So now let's talk about my analysis, and I like to bring this up again with the brightness setting, that the brightness setting has no impact on the specular highlights or maximum peak brightness of specular highlights like the moon here. As you can see, brightness is set to 0. The estimated luminance is around 880 candela, and even I'm increasing the brightness to the maximum, the estimated luminance is still 880 candela. So again, you can set up brightness as you like, it will not affect specular highlights. Let's talk about SDR on the right side and HDR on the left side. And right now HDR likes to output 720 candela on specular highlights like this tile here on the floor. On the other hand, SDR is limited to 160 nits or candela, which is quite normal for SDR content. And I think there's right now no doubt about that HDR just looks better compared to SDR, but let's have a closer look here. In terms of details in specular highlights, we shouldn't expect too much from Auto HDR games, because we need to keep in mind, it is still a SDR game. All what we're getting is a higher peak brightness. So that means instead of 160 candela, we're getting now the maximum peak brightness from our display. But again, in this case, it is limited to 880 candela, which I don't understand quite right now. I need to do more testing in terms of that with different Auto HDR games. Maybe that's a thing what Auto HDR is doing, and it's just limiting to 800 candela. I'm not quite sure. Anyway, regardless of that, I think it's very clear that SDR here on the right side has not the, the same punch as the left side or HDR picture. And just to prove a point that the Xbox HDR system level calibration is actually working, I have provided 2 screenshots. This one was taken with the setting 300 in the HDR menu on the Xbox, and the maximum peak brightness is around 550 candela. So when I set now the maximum brightness in the HDR menu on the Xbox to 10,000 nits, the game likes to output 880 nits. So this is something what I don't quite understand, but again, I will do more testing with Auto HDR games. And there's just one remaining question left, and this is what picture mode or HDR mode you should actually use now. Dolby Vision, HDR10, Dynamic Tone Mapping on, Dynamic Tone Mapping off, or HGHE. And yeah, let me start with Dynamic Tone Mapping off. And in my opinion, this is in most of the games the worst choice. So I prefer in Alan Wake, if we're talking about HDR10, I prefer HGHE, because you can compensate the brightness loss from HGHE versus Dynamic Tone Mapping on in certain situations like this here. As you can see here, Dynamic Tone Mapping on is of course much brighter, but if you think it's too dark, then just go into the menu and increase the brightness setting slightly, because again, it will not affect specular highlights. Again, Dynamic Tone Mapping off is for me the worst choice. I really don't like it at all, but at the end, it is absolutely up to you how you like to play this game. In my opinion, Dolby Vision is the best way. Dolby Vision is my recommended mode on the LG ZX when it comes to play this game, because in terms of the maximum peak brightness, Dolby Vision is around 20 to 30 candela brighter than HDR10 with Dynamic Tone Mapping on. HGHE on the other hand is or has the lowest brightness from all the 3 HDR modes, HGHE, Dynamic Tone Mapping on, and Dolby Vision. And again, I'm not quite sure why this is the case, because usually HGHE and Dolby Vision are very, very similar. But in this game, again, my recommendation is Dolby Vision. Okay, my friends, so that's it for this video. I say thank you very much for watching me. Please like, share, and subscribe. And yeah, I see you next time. Bye.